It's been many, many years since I've collected Hot Toys. In my early days of collecting, when I first got into the hobby as a whole, 1/6 scale Hot Toys were my go-tos. I was the dude who had detolfs on the wall and 1/6 scale figures in each cabinet. Over time, I graduated. Guess I did graduate. I gravitated away from Hot Toys and went more to quarter scale statues, premium formats from Sideshow, which then became the gateway to things like Prime One statues, XM Studio, the big guys. Um, and largely left Hot Toys behind. However, every once in a while they come out with a quarter scale figure that's just I can't pass it up because of how much it passes for a statue, in my opinion. This quarter scale Batman from the Dark Knight trilogy is one of those figures. So this review is going to be from a different perspective. You might see a more traditional review. You might want a more traditional review of this figure from the perspective of a Hot Toys collector who's going to go over all the points of articulation and all the different hands and swap outs you get. And just know that this isn't that kind of review. I'm reviewing this from the perspective of a statue collector who sometimes dabbles in quarter scale Hot Toys. If that sounds cool to you, stick around. If not, no offense taken. I understand if you want a more traditional review of this figure. Let's go.
You don't owe these people anymore. You've given them everything.
Not everything. Not yet.
Alright, what's up everybody? My name is Sammy, your favorite statue reviewer. That intro doesn't work as well when I'm reviewing Hot Toys, but I'm going to say it anyway. And yeah, we're here with a review of the quarter scale Christian Bale Batman from the Dark Knight trilogy. Now, the very first quarter scale figure that Hot Toys ever made was this guy right here. Not with this base though. I mean, we'll get into that figure later, because at the end of this review, I do want to compare it to that figure because I did own it. And I want to talk about whether or not I think this is an upgrade, whether or not I think you should buy this if you already have that figure. We're going to go over that. But I want to spend the first part of this review talking about this figure itself without comparing it to anything else, just talking about the figure and talking about why it really attracted me as a statue collector, because I really think that this thing was, and I can't claim to know the inner workings of the minds of the Hot Toys, figure producers, but I really feel like they made this to try to appeal to statue collectors more than figure collectors. But anyway, let's get into the actual figure. When you open the box, this is actually hilarious. When you open the box of this figure, the brown shipper box, you are greeted with the foam cutouts of the figure itself. There is no art box to this thing. And I think that's hilarious. I don't care. But I know that there's a lot of Hot Toys collectors who really weren't a big fan of that, and they kind of took to the pages and the forums and bitched about, oh, we're paying for this quarter scale statue or quarter scale figure. We don't even get an art box, whatever. I don't want to say bitching, but I mean, they were complaining, objectively complaining. And I mean, I guess I get it. Trying to put my mind in the perspective of a Hot Toys collector, I understand the art boxes kind of are part of the appeal. I remember when I collected Hot Toys back in the day, I sometimes would display the art boxes with the figure, like in the detolf. I mean, there were some that had some amazing art boxes, and I understand the perspective of like, look, I'm paying top dollar for this figure, you don't even give me an art box. But at the same time, I mean, I don't want to sound insensitive, but who fucking cares? I don't know. I don't really care. I mean, I'm going to put the box away and never display it. But I don't know. I wanted to touch on that a little bit because I just thought it was kind of funny that people were in a like outcry over the fact that there's no art box. The art box is the shipper box. I mean, the shipper box does literally have the design of Batman on it and everything. But then once you get into the figure itself, you don't get as many accessories this time around as you did with the first release of this figure, which we'll get into towards the end. Instead, this is kind of more of a statue-esque collection of pieces. You have your typical unmasked Christian Bale sculpt, which is par for the course for Hot Toys, incredible. As a quarter scale statue collector, I never really understood why these companies, why Sideshow and Prime One and all these. Prime One is good, but a lot of these movie statues that are quarter scale, even 1/3 scale, will just not have really great portraits, not very movie accurate or actor accurate portraits. And within the statue community, and I guess I was more critical of that than most because as a Hot Toys collector, I've seen what Hot Toys can do, let alone quarter scale. I've seen what they can do with sixth scale portraits, and they are like a carbon copy of the movie actors. I never understood why the movie, the movie statues couldn't achieve that same level of quality. And now I'm sure it's a different sculpting and printing process. This material is not the same. It's not polystone. It's not porcelain. It's not the same material as statues are. And I'm not going to claim to know the inner workings and the ins and outs of all these sculpting processes, but I feel like shouldn't be that hard to achieve this level of quality on a statue. All this to say that this is an amazing unmasked portrait. I really love it. I fail to recall if it's the same exact one as the first release of this figure. I seem to remember the hair on the first release of this figure being a bit, I don't know what the word, smoother? Like, not as, I don't know what the word is, but I think that this is a new portrait. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but even if it's the same sculpt as the original release of this figure, it is definitely newly painted. I can tell you for certain that this is a better paint job on this portrait than the first release of this figure. You also get, which for me was one of the main reasons that I sold the first release of this figure and got this one, this bust. This bust is awesome. Oh, look. Damn. Did that butterfly just fly into that frame? That's why I'm doing this outside. Natural light is beautiful, especially for an all-black figure like this. Anyway, you get this bust with the figure as well, which is, this isn't part of, this neck piece isn't part of it. I don't want to take it out, but the bust, well, there we go. This is the bust you get. And this is intended to display essentially whatever head you're not using on the figure. You can use either the unmasked portrait, the unmasked cowl that the special edition of this figure comes with, and this provided neck piece allows you to put it in there like that, or you can use the unmasked portrait in there as well, which I'll show you how that looks. And you get this black piece. I mean, this is basically like a 6 scale. I mean, I would imagine the 6 scale releases of Bale Batman also has this neck piece. I mean, everything is the same, just upscaled. But you can also put Christian Bale in here like that. I actually kind of like this look. I tried the unmasked portrait on there when I first got this figure, and then I decided, no, I'm just going to use the empty cowl. But now that this is back on there, I kind of like it. The only thing is it's a little loose. Not loose as in it's going to fall out. It's not going to fall out. But it is a little loose in there, like this. And I think that's why I decided to opt for the empty cowl, because when you put the empty cowl in there, no such shakage. Now, granted, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to be shaking this thing around anyway, but whatever. It is worth noting that, and again, maybe I'm pointing this out when I really don't need to be pointing this out, but again, the perspective of a statue collector. This is a really cool bust. It's really awesome to look at, and it's really movie accurate, and it's very intricately detailed. But the second you pick it up, it feels really cheap. I mean, it feels really cheap. Like, this is just a hollow piece of plastic, which is fine. Which is fine. It really is fine. I don't want to say that like I'm complaining about it or something, but I guess it's worth noting. If you're, I'm noting this in case anybody is watching this video from my perspective as well, the point of view of a statue collector who may be potentially wanting to pick this thing up to put in their statue collection, because I still think it can fit perfectly in a statue collection. There's just a few things that, as a statue collector, you're going to be a bit jarred by. Maybe. I don't know. Now, the second accessory that you get with this figure that bills it as a statue, pretty much, is this base right here. This base is amazing. This base is the main reason that I bought this, even though I already owned the first release of this figure. This base is the reason I sold that and pre-ordered this. Because it's a statue base. I mean, this is what I mean. I really have a hard time thinking or believing that this base was not somewhat inspired by other Batman statues on the market. I mean, I have to believe that Hot Toys really looked at Batman statues, and we're like, okay, how can we make this figure more like a statue? Give him a base that would come with a statue. This is a base I would expect to be shipped with a Batman statue. Really. I mean, granted, I would expect it to be better sculpted and better painted and not feel hollow like this thing, but still, I mean, it's the look of it, right? On the front, you have... I'm being very careful turning this thing because I wanted to do this video outside, but I'm sacrificing stability here. This table is not very stable. But hey, we're good so far. On the front, well, I guess there's no objective front of the base. I mean, you could display it either way. Here you have, it's like the Mount Rushmore of the Dark Knight Trilogy villains. You have Heath Ledger's Joker on the front there. You've got, I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to just assume you can, but you've got Bane from The Dark Knight Rises. And you've also got, fuck it, let's just turn it around a bit quicker. You've got Ra's al Ghul from Batman Begins. No love for Scarecrow, but whatever. And then on the other side, if you really don't care for the villains, if you're not feeling the Mount Rushmore of villains, sorry I'm turning it so slow, but I have to. You have this eagle base, a more traditional looking, something you'd expect on a more traditional Batman statue. And the interesting part of this base, which I didn't know until I got this thing in hand, is that, and I'm not going to do it on camera, I apologize, because that would require me to take Batman on. It would require too many steps. If you get this eagle part of it, along with the part of the base that Batman stands on, comes off. The idea is that on the corner, like even imagine the corner of this table, right? You can kind of put this eagle part on the corner with the eagle kind of, you know, reaching or bleeding over the edge of the table. I don't know why I'm struggling to find the right words to explain this, but you get what I'm saying, and it's in the instruction manual for the figure too. But the idea is you can display it as kind of this corner piece with Batman standing on the eagle, watching over the city or watching over your collection as it stands over the corner of a table or a Detolf cabinet or a Besta shelf, whatever you have to display your stuff on. I mean, overall, it's a really good base. It kind of suffers the same illusion that this bust sells you, is that, I mean, once you pick up this base, it's very hollow and it's very cheap feeling, but again, it's fine. I mean, you're supposed to just look at it, and it looks great. I will say my one gripe with this base, and it's a tiny nitpick. Actually, two gripes. First of all, the nameplate on here is very obviously just reused from the first edition of this figure, because that nameplate says The Dark Knight Rises. And this figure, and all the marketing and the promotional, and all the, like, the product listing on Sideshow, I mean, this is being billed as a Dark Knight Trilogy figure, not just from The Dark Knight Rises. And so it's a little bit of a disconnect having it say Dark Knight Rises on the nameplate, especially when that nameplate is right over Heath Ledger's Joker and not Bane, which comes off as a little bit sloppy to me. But at the same time, you gotta lean in and squint and read the nameplate. I mean, who's really gonna do that? My second gripe with this base is a gripe that I shared with the base of the first release of this figure as well. Is that, and this might be on me, because I'm stubborn, and I don't like to use the crotch grabbers, I don't like to use the, I know it might sound stupid to say this, but to me it completely breaks the immersion of, you could tell I'm saying this, I'm not a Hot Toys collector. I mean, I'm sure Hot Toys purists are listening to me say this right now, and they're like, "Fuck is wrong with you? Like, what are you saying?" But for me, those crotch grabber stands and the waist grabber, they just break the immersion for me. I look at it and I'm like, okay, this is no longer this is just like a little action figure. Again, half of you are probably cringing at those words right now, but whatever, man. But my gripe what I was getting to is that the surface of this base is not very even for Batman to stand on. I mean, I have him standing now, and he's pretty stable on there. I mean, I've been turning everything, and there's been wind, and he hasn't blown away. But it is kind of a bitch to get him to stand on here without the crotch grabber. I'm just saying that because if you're like me and you want to just have him standing on there, you're going to have to finagle those feetally. You're going to have to mess around with the placement to get him to stand. There's only really a couple of ways that he can be positioned on this base and stand upright. The first edition of this figure suffered the same problem. The base was this diorama-esque base with like rocks, and then it was supposed to be the scene from The Dark Knight, you know, where Batman is like standing and there's that rebar, like after Rachel gets blown up. And so the way that base was, like, Batman's feet had to be oriented a certain way for him to stand on there. Otherwise, good luck. But yeah, aside from those nitpicks, I mean, the thing is, once you have this guy on there, he's on there. He's not going to fall off. But it is worth noting that it's hard to get him to stand on there. I mean, I imagine with the crotch grabber too. I mean, it probably still would be the same issue, because then you'd have to bend the legs and it wouldn't look natural and whatever. Now, getting into Batman himself, look, Hot Toys purists will probably sit here and tell you all the proportions aren't the same as what they can probably put these figures side by side, the first one and this one, and be like, yeah, you could tell there's a bit more padding in the chest this time around, and maybe all that is true, and kudos to them for being able to tell. But to me, I just kind of look at it and I say, yeah, this looks like Christian Bale's Batman to me. I mean, the proportions look good to me. The suit is very intricately sculpted, intricately detailed and painted. I mean, it's what I've come to expect from Hot Toys, because like I said, I used to be a Hot Toys collector when I first started collecting, and I loved all the 6-scale figures that I bought, and I've had a couple of their quarter scales. I had this guy, I had the Joker and Batman Begin, mostly the Dark Knight trilogy stuff. I got the quarter scales of, and quarter scale Hot Toys really is well detailed. He looks right out of the movie. This is the kind of stuff I look at and I say, well, how come statue companies can't do this? And they can, but sometimes not this well. It is worth noting, and you probably already realized this, but this is a custom cape. This is not the cape that comes with the figure. Hot Toys is notorious for very lackluster stock capes. This one is no different. I don't hate it. It's actually one of the better ones Hot Toys has made. But I'm sorry, nothing beats a black velvet Jackson XU wired cape. I mean, most of the appeal of the statue to me really is the wired cape. It all just comes together. Batman standing on the base, and I have him posed in this kind of museum-esque pose with his grapnel gun, and it sells the image of this thing as a statue, in my opinion. Without the sculpted cape, I really don't know if I would like this guy as much as I do, because the cape really adds so much personality and dimension to the figure. I don't want to sit here and talk about all these different points of articulation and go in depth on all that, because frankly, I haven't even tested. I just kind of posed this thing, and I did test the limits kind of a little bit, but this really is not a traditional Hot Toys review video. But I imagine if that's a problem for you, you've already stopped watching. So I'm talking to the few of you who have decided, oh, cool, I like this guy's angle. So I'm gonna I'm gonna gloss over these articulation points and just say that it's well articulated. I mean, you see, I have his hand bent in almost a 90. Actually, it is kind of a 90-degree, a little bit angle. The figure moves how I want it to move. I will say I wish the waist was a little bit more articulated. It's not very generous. There's not a lot of give in the waist, and once you twist it and then let go, it kind of falls back into place. The neck doesn't move that much. I kind of was really hoping I'd be able to get a bit more of a turn on his face and neck there, but I couldn't. What else should I really talk about? I mean, the accessories are kind of standard for a Batman figure. I guess this is the part now where, now that I've talked about everything that's unique to this edition of the figure, I'll start talking about Batman himself and how he compares to the first release of the figure. Because the first edition, I've already went over the base that it had, but it also had more accessories. It had a lot more hands. One of my main gripes with this figure is you really don't get that many hands. You get the balled up fists, you get gun holding hands, batarang holding hand, and that's about it. The first edition of this figure had a lot more hands. What else did the first release of this figure have? It also had more accessories. It had an empty Bane mask. Is that really even a mask? Yeah, it kind of is a mask. It had a Joker mask and a Scarecrow mask. So it had these props of different villains from the trilogy. Instead of the masks, this figure represents its villains in the way of this base. And I do prefer this way better. Again, everything about this figure just fits more into a statue collection, in my opinion, than the first edition did. And especially at quarter scaling, most people, I won't say most people, most of the people I know collect quarter scale statues. And so you give them a figure like this with no visible joints or seams or anything. I mean, this build as a statue. I could fool my friends. They could think it's a statue. I want to go over now, to end this review, whether or not I think this is an like you should buy this if you have the first release of this figure? The short answer is no. I don't think, because the short answer is no, and I'm saying that from the perspective of a Hot Toys collector. If you collect Hot Toys, if your main display in your room is Hot Toys figures, and you already have the first release of this figure, I don't think that this does enough to justify an upgrade. However, if you are a statue collector, I would seriously consider this figure, whether or not you own the first release or not, because the first release also could fit a little bit. It could fit in a statue collection. That's what I did with it, just not as much as this one, in my opinion. So if you are a statue collector and you've been looking for a quarter scale movie Batman, a Christian Bale Batman, there's not that many offerings. You know, there is a Queen Studios one, which is really cool. I almost bought it, but then I didn't. There is a Sideshow premium format. You know, there are a couple of offerings in the way of quarter scale Christian Bale Batman statues, but in my opinion, this is the best one. Which may sound funny to say when I'm saying this is just a Hot Toy figure compared to a statue, but Hot Toys excel in movie accurate representation. I mean, this suit is a carbon copy of Batman from the movies. The cape, I mean, aside from all the dust that's on the cape that I have to take care of, it really is, everything about this just screams movie accurate. His cowl, the separate rolling eyeballs, the unmasked sculpt, and just the accessories that this comes with just really makes it more at home in a statue setup. Most statues these days from the bigger companies like Prime One Studio, if they come with more than one portrait, they'll come with a bust to display the extra portraits. I mean, everything about this figure just seamlessly would just blend right at home. So if you are a statue collector, I would really consider this. If you're a Hot Toys collector, a Hot Toys purist, and you already own the first release, just stick with that. You get more accessories, you get, you get more to do and swap out, and you'll like it more. I don't know. This is more of a standalone, like, museum kind of statue piece that you put away and look at, and you don't pose very often. But yeah, that's about all. I mean, I knew when I made this video I wasn't going to have a ton to say, like, in the way of a traditional Hot Toys review, but I did just want to talk about this piece a bit, because I know of people that collect both statues and Hot Toys, and their main issue with Hot Toys is that, well, it's so obviously just an action figure and like a doll, and I put it in my statue display and it won't really work. You can see that it's just, you can just see that it's a toy. And while this, obviously, once you really get up and start to look at it, you can see that it is just a figure, it still retains that statue aesthetic to me. And that is largely due to that base. And the wired cape. But yeah, this is a really cool figure, guys. I mean, the Dark Knight trilogy is my favorite movie trilogy of all time, so I mean, this was kind of a no-brainer, honestly. And I'm pleased with this purchase. But at this point, I feel like I'm just kind of repeating myself, which is the trap I fall into a lot of the time when I'm making these videos. So I'm just going to end it here. I wanted to do one quick roundabout 360. And yeah, I just wanted to talk about this figure for a while. So thank you for watching, guys. As always, I appreciate each and every single one of you. Peace out, take care of yourselves, and till next time.